Well, welcome everyone back to Kitchen Table TCG. We have an all new series here for you with the recent announcement of the calling in the United States and all the stuff going on, and the number of players and potential collectors I think that are going to be interested in this game in the next couple months. I wanted to do a new series about my personal goals and attitudes towards collecting Flesh and Blood. It's going to be kind of like a collector's guide to Flesh and Blood, and I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know all the details of it. I just know I want to do it. We've done this Whale, Dolphin, Lucky Fish series on my channel, which has been probably my favorite series, but the stories have kind of slowed down, and I think we've kind of gotten through a lot of people who want to share. If you want to do that, still email me at KitchenTableTCG@gmail.com, but I needed a new series, a new thing to be really excited about, and so this is it. This is the collecting series that I'm really excited about. We're going to talk about storage, we'll talk about goals, we'll talk about collecting in a healthy way without breaking your bank. But first, I want to start out by saying this, that Flesh and Blood is a player's game. And I think personally that it is and has the potential to continue to be the best game, best players TCG, trading card game in the world, and that it will continue to do so. I would not have started this YouTube channel and kind of changed my life around to do this YouTube channel if I didn't believe that Flesh and Blood was a game for players. That being said, the game is also created in a way that excites and brings in collectors into the market. And so anybody in the comment section who is saying that Flesh and Blood is, nobody plays the game, it's just ridiculous. I mean, look in the world, look in the amount of skirmishes and the amount of road to national stuff that's happening, and just look there, people are playing the game, but people are also collecting it. And so I think that's important. So I wanted to address that. Now let's talk about some ways that I think that this is important. Number one, a lot of people look at and see like the price of a spring tunic, which, this is, somebody got this really luckily this week and never thought they could afford it on eBay, but were able to pick it up because of some life things that happened, but also the prices were really low. So I never thought I'd be able to get that. But the cold foil tunic, people look at it and say, how does anybody afford to play this game if it's thousands of dollars? Well, they've printed an unlimited version of the card. And so today we're gonna talk a little bit about cold foils, the difference between cold foils, some attitudes towards collecting that I have towards cold foils. But you can get an unlimited rainbow foil tunic, which is the only unlimited print currently, for around $200. So a player could get into the game. And now this is a generic equipment, so it can be used in a lot of decks. So when you buy it, it doesn't just, filter out and not be usable anymore. You can use it in other decks. Now I do want to say there's another first edition option for the tunic, which is in Crucible of War, which is a non-foil tunic, okay? This card will be printed in unlimited and will probably be even cheaper than the rainbow foil one from Unlimited WTR. And what I'm trying to make a point here is that the developers of the game, LSS, have created a system with their unlimited product that allows players to get the cards for cheap, and I think will continue to allow players to get the cards cheaper than they maybe even currently are because of the demand. But in addition, there's a collectible market that's for the collectors, and that's really booming and really a healthy thing. So I just wanted to address that because I think it's really important to understand the difference between the attitudes of a collector and buying cards and the attitudes of a player and buying cards, and how I believe that LSS is really trying to find that really thin line and is doing a great job. And that's actually what got me really excited about the game. So let's talk about how to start collecting then in Flesh and Blood, and we're going to talk about kind of my attitude towards that. For me, when I think about, when I tell my friends, hey, this is what I would do to start collecting Flesh and Blood, it is 100% about the cold foils. Cold foils are basically the reserve list of Magic the Gathering. In other words, the company has come out and stated that they will not reprint the cold foil version, so that spring tunic that you just saw, they will not reprint that cold foil version. They will never print it again in cold foil. The only caveat, and we'll talk about this later, is that the cold foil promos that are not in the booster boxes can be reprinted, okay? they cannot and will not reprint a Spring Tunic cold foil. So that's a very important thing. And that's why I think that's the place to start, because that's the like, you want your collectible asset to hold its value, to be something to be proud of. And so like the collectible game in Flesh and Blood is about the cold foils. Again, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people will talk about Rainbow Foil First Edition and stuff like that. That's up to you to decide. For me, the game is cold foils. So, you know, the thing about cold foils, this is what gets me so excited. This is what gets me just jimmy jammed up, because the game is so perfect. The game is so perfect because most of the cold foils are highly playable cards. Spring Tunic being one of the probably most playable cards in the game. Most of the cold foils are highly playable cards. Let's start with the Phantasmal Footsteps, a card in Monarch from the Illusionist class, and this is an unlimited Phantasmal Footsteps, and the card is played in every Prism deck is going to want to run Phantasmal Footsteps. In the future, you know, it's an Illusionist equipment, so in the future, more and more Illusionist heroes will probably want to run the Phantasmal Footsteps. And so in turn, when you think about an investment that's a reserve list, quote unquote, card in the cold foil version of the Phantasmal Footsteps, that really makes this like a way to like have some additional excitement about your cards. It drives this additional value of it people wanting to kind of, you know, the quote of like pimp out their decks, make their decks really blingy and bling it out and like make it awesome and make it really exciting. And so that's why I love that the cold foils, the collectible side of the game, are also highly playable cards. But again, don't lose this, they print them in non-cold foil, in rainbow foil, in the main set. So that's all in the unlimited set. So that's what I love about the cold foils. I think they're highly playable cards. They'll be iconic cards. So I think that's really great. So you've got this kind of, if I were to start collecting, if I was just hopping in, I would start looking at some of these like more commonly played cards. And that's where I would start hopping in and collecting. This is like a really big reason that I talked about cold foil commons so early on in my channel. Because a cold foil common, the cards are highly played cards. Here's a Heart and Cross Strap that's you know pretty played, and you know the Snapdragon Scalers is one of the more iconic cards. One of the more iconic cards in the Flesh and Blood world. It's it's a highly played card. It was used in a lot of decks early on. It's still used pretty often in decks, and it's a generic card. It's a common card, and it's highly playable. And the cold foil version is a reserve list card, basically. And so that's why I say, if you are hopping in, like this is one of the big reasons with WTR is, there are only 800 and I think there's 833 legendaries or something like that, around that number. And then there's only like 1,000 of each specific cold foil common. So like the difference between a Snapdragon Scalers and a Spring Tunic is really only like 200 cards, which I thought was really amazing, because the cold foil commons were a lot cheaper to hop on board with. A Tunic was like $3 or $4 grand, but the cold foil common was like $75 to $100. And like that's why I started saying, man, like if I'm gonna enter into collecting Flesh and Blood, the cold foil commons are a perfect spot to enter. And I still think that's true. Even though a lot of the WTR cold foils are now, $300 or $400, the Snapdragon Scalers being like an $800 card, you can still get a first edition or an alpha card, an alpha cold foil in the $200 to $300 range if you're patient currently on the market. I don't know, in 5 months, I don't think that's gonna be the case. But the cold foil commons from Monarch could be a great opportunity for you to hop in to collecting the game in a cold foil way. And these are only like $75 to $80 right now, which makes it a great way to hop in to collecting the game for a cheaper value, and for the ability for you to continue to like see the cards as exciting in the future. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the promos, because this is a interesting thing that they've done. The promos, which are, a lot of the heroes are promos. And there are other promos as well, but a lot of the heroes are promos. They've said that they are reprintable. In other words, they could reprint a cold foil Katsu at any point and they want. But they haven't abused that, and I don't know if they will or not. I don't really care because they have come out and said and made an announcement that they can. And so, like, as a thing, if you want a cold foil hero for your deck to kind of bling out your deck, go ahead and do it. That being said, I don't see them as much of a, we'll talk at the end of this, that all collectibles or most collectibles are also investable. The promos I don't see as investable because, again, there's that kind of ceiling for them as they could reprint them and lower the bar. Whereas the cold foil commons and all those things, there's really no ceiling for them because they won't reprint them. So I wanted to address that before you go out and buy a bunch of cold foil promos. Just be aware of that as you start collecting. Although I personally wanted one of each of the promos. I don't have the heroes. I only have one cold foil hero from the adult heroes. But the armory events, I've tried to purchase a couple of those that I really like the hero from, and so I still like them for the collecting, but there is a little caveat of like it might get reprinted, so don't go crazy on that if you're a big collector. Okay, now finally, I know I'm really excited. I hope this is finding you well. The last thing I want to talk about, and we're going to talk a lot about collecting in the future. So like this is video one, the cold foil, start, is that you can try to identify some cold foils that maybe potentially without any absolution could potentially be shorter printed than the rest. And this is why I really think there's a lot of value in box openings, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people complain, but by watching box openings and kind of seeing things, you can start to see what it might be short printed and what might not. For example, the Galaxy Black from Monarch appears, this is the alternative art, only available in cold foil, alternative art Galaxy Black. And it appears that this card does not pop up as often. Again, I'm not saying that's true. In my box openings and a lot of the box openings, a lot of people also agree that it might be shorter printed than the other Majestic cold foils. Really, neither here nor there. The point I'm trying to make is you can start to kind of figure out, another one is Cheyenne. And there's been a lot of conversation. I can't really show you the cold foiling on my Cheyenne, but there's been a lot of speculation on Cheyenne because a lot of people who opened a lot of boxes, got the same number of Cheyennes or less Cheyenne, multiple Cheyenne. Twin Cheyenne. I don't know. A lot of people got less Cheyenne than they did the Arknight Shard, even when they were opening 100 boxes, whatever. And that's not exactly the best. It could still happen, but a lot of people and for me, I opened 40 boxes. I've gotten one Shard and no Cheyennes. I've gotten 3 tunics. Is it anyway, the point being, you can start playing games with what do you want to put your investment or collecting in and what might be short printed, because the number of supply will always be kind of what guides is a collectible fun to collect, or not, sorry, back up. It is always fun to collect collectibles, but the investment side of it, what you could see as return on your collectible investment. So that being said, I do want to end with this. Collectibles are not always investable, and this is not investment advice, but whether or not they are investable or not, they can be really fun to collect. And I do want to say, when it comes to blinging out your deck or really just finding these collectibles that you wrote, for me, it was the cold foil commons because I couldn't afford the legendaries. And for me, that was really exciting to have a cold foil from WTR. And so I wanted one of each of the cold foils for WTR. Collectibles are not always investable, but I really do believe that in Flesh and Blood, you can have this kind of, if the game is still alive, and still going in 5 years, which this guy, man, I believe that wholeheartedly, that this is an investment as well as a collectible. And I love love that about collectibles. I have in my life done I feel like a pretty good job of collecting things that are able to hold value and picking out things that are able to hold value. And then, when I get kind of, for me, it was retro video games. I started collecting retro video games, and then I kind of grew out of that hobby. I was able to fund a whole photography company based on my collectible hobby. And so it wasn't meant to be an investment. It was a collection, and I loved it, and I played with it, and I enjoyed the collection. But I always looked at the value, and I always made sure to know what the value was, so that when I was done with it, I could roll it over into another hobby, or in that case, a business. And that's how I started my photography business. And then, with that, I was able to start collecting, magic cards. And, I watched the value, and, I collected, I played, I enjoyed, I was a part of the community of Magic the Gathering. And then now I've sold my Magic the Gathering to fund my Flesh and Blood. And I really feel like, right now at least, I found what I love. Like, I found what I'm excited about. And maybe someday I'll move some of my Flesh and Blood into another hobby, or I'll move this into that, or I'll do more Magic the Gathering into Flesh and Blood. My point being that collectibles are not always investable, but I do believe that they can be investable. And I do believe that they are really, really fun to collect. Cold foils are really, really fun to collect. And I would really encourage you, if you are going to start collecting Flesh and Blood, that you start with cold foils. That's all I got for you guys today. Hope you have a great day, and remember to be kind to the people around you.